Excellencies, honorable ministers, laureates, distinguished guests, dear friends, good morning and welcome to the official closing of 2017 World Water Week. We have had an amazing week with some 3,300 participants from nearly 130 countries around the globe. And it's tremendously rewarding to see that many professionals making the effort to come together here in Stockholm. So thank you for being here. It has been a busy week for all of us, filled with seminars, events, mingles, and many, many meetings in the sidelines. And this is exactly as we intended it to be. World Water Week is an opportunity to learn and share knowledge, but it's also a very important meeting place, definitely. We have an impressive lineup of speakers for you this morning. Shortly, we will play a video message from Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm very pleased that she will, despite not being able to come here, which were the plans, but we have sent a personal message to the meeting. Mark Watts from C40 will then talk to us about how to reach low-carbon, water-wise cities. As always, Torkel Jön-Clausen, representing the World Water Week Scientific Program Committee, will give us the main conclusions from the seminars that appeared during this week. Thereafter, my colleague at Siwi, Katarina Wem, will guide the rapporteurs through their main takeaways from the week, and Robert Boss will present the Best Workshop Poster Award. I just wonder who will be the winner this year. Yeah, eager to wait. There will be a break, and after the break, our key collaborating partners will provide their reflection on the week that has just more or less ended. And last but not least, we will hear from Ms. Nomvula Mokonjane, Minister of Water and Sanitation in South Africa, to reflection on the week that has just passed. But first, I would like to share with you a few of my own takeaways from this week. And as always, I have met a lot of familiar faces, but also made many new connections, both from inside the water community and beyond. And that is the idea about the World Water Week. It has been enriching and energizing. The week, at least for me, is like one extensive, yet almost very enlightening, long conversation. It's like a melting pot of ideas, perspectives, and solutions that only really starts to settle when the week is coming to a close. First, the week is a real opportunity to influence policymaking. We see more and more decision makers from different communities coming here to discuss and to learn. And this is very encouraging because we cannot strengthen water governance without improved and properly implemented policies. Second, governance itself provides the foundation needed for financing and for the implementation of technological advancements. Solid governance will be needed to both spur and improve the efficiency of investments, and the same goes for technology. Strong governance needs to be put in place to ensure that resources are used sustainably and as intended. Third, the increasing number of young people who choose to attend the World Water Week is very promising for our future. This year, just over 25% of participants are 35 years or younger. And on Sunday, we had the Young Professionals Day, which offered a lively mix of sessions. On Tuesday evening, we celebrated the finalists of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize. And these brilliant teenagers developed projects that made even Stockholm Water Prize laureates jealous. Fourth, we see an increased interest from private sector and business actors, this is escalating week after week. At Siwi and the World Water Week, we would like to expand that opportunities, an arena for collaboration between the public, private sector, and civil society at large. For some years, we have been conducting a breakfast for business leaders. We had it yesterday. The room was filled, so I see that as a sign that we in the future also open up the scope for more interaction between the public and private sector actors during the World Water Weeks. Fifth, our aim with the World Water Week is that it should be the one, or maybe the annual stock taking of what's going on in the SDG, the Agenda 2030, linking it to the climate change agenda. And I believe this position has been strengthened this year. We had an event on the subject yesterday where the Hungarian President, János Áder, said we need a more focused global effort towards tackling the water challenges. We cannot allow the water goal to fall behind. And finally, we know that nearly 2/3 of all countries at the globe share some common water resources, and that countries tend to cooperate rather than go into armed conflict over those waters. However, we were told yesterday also, the increased scarcity of water resources worldwide might change that in the future. And that gives even greater importance to the international water law framework that provides us with the foundation to tackle this future challenge. And this year's Stockholm Water Prize laureate, Professor McCaffrey, is a true inspiration in this area. Now, we will listen to a message from the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations, Amina Mohammed. It should be on the screen momentarily.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations on another successful World Water Week. I place great importance on the subjects that you've been discussing, just as Jan Eliasson, my predecessor, did. His leadership on water and close involvement with World Water Week are internationally recognized. And I'd like to echo his calls for adequate financing, especially for sanitation. His landmark meetings at the World Bank with ministers of finance opened the door to addressing investments in water. Without progress on sanitation, we cannot hope to achieve our goals on education, health, and empowering women and girls. To build a future of dignity, resilience, and prosperity for all, we must accelerate progress towards SDG 6 on clean water and sanitation, and on all the water-related sustainable development goals. Today, strains on water are rising in all regions, and climate change is aggravating the challenge. When water is unequally shared or perceived to be, the risk of local and national conflict increases. There are even seeing in some cases the use of water as a weapon of war. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm encouraged by your fruitful deliberations. It is important to address water from an ecosystem and holistic perspective. This is integral to implementing the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement on climate change. You've drawn important lessons for future policy and actions in both urban and rural settings. The priority now is to harness national leadership and global partnership to scale up action. The United Nations is fully committed to supporting global efforts on water and sanitation, including through the Secretary General's High-Level Panel on Water and the International Decade for Action on Water for Sustainable Development. Next year, the High-Level Political Forum will review progress towards SDG 6 to provide access to safe drinking water and adequate sanitation for all and to reduce pollution. Only by assuring the sustainability of fresh water and access to sanitation for all will we achieve the SDGs. Let us value and treasure water as we value and treasure life itself. Thank you.
A big applause. Even if it's recorded, I guess it went through to New York. Thank you. Now, our next speaker represents one of the most important groups when it comes to implementation of the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement, cities. I would like to invite Mark Watts from C40 to address this audience this morning. Mark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm really delighted to be here. Unfortunately, just arriving at the end of what sounds like it's been a fantastic week. But just to start, just tell you a little bit about, for those who don't know us, of the organisation that I represent, which is the C40, which is now an organisation of the mayors of many of the world's greatest cities. We have 91 members now, mostly megacities, mostly with a population of over 3 million people. And our sole aim in bringing together those mayors is to enable them to become more ambitious in tackling climate change and take some of the burden of political leadership in the world for addressing the challenge of climate change. So our members include most of the most famous cities in the world. Our chair is the Mayor of Paris, New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, Singapore. 650 million people live in our member cities. About a quarter of world GDP is generated there, 11% of the global population. And the way that we work is primarily to facilitate the exchange of best practice between the mayors and the senior staff of those cities, so that good ideas are replicated very rapidly all across the world, and each mayor feels emboldened to be more ambitious in cutting emissions and making their cities more resilient by learning from what worked and indeed what didn't work in other cities that have similar geography, similar size, similar economies. And in our 12 years or so of existence, we can see that that is really now working. We measure very carefully all of the actions that are taken relating to climate change across all of our member cities. And a quarter of all of the climate action that's been delivered in our 91 member cities in the last decade, we can show is directly related to sharing knowledge, to copying an idea or learning from an idea in one of the other member cities. And indeed, the second number on the screen here, we also see that those cities that have put in place robust climate action plans of some description take 3 times as much climate action as the cities that don't. So we have a big focus on putting in place robust plans. And the final number here, which is a 0, is we're unusual in the way that we operate in that we don't charge any membership fee to be part of C40. We're fortunate to be largely philanthropically funded, but instead we set very tough membership standards, participation standards, so that we can show that we're driving forward action across all of our cities. So I say that just as a preamble to then talking about why we're so interested to be part of this wonderful event and are really starting to have a much bigger focus on water in C40. And that really stems from a program that we launched in December of last year in Mexico City, which is called Deadline 2020. And it's an analysis of what it will take for the major cities of the world to deliver action on climate change that is consistent with the most ambitious goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, constraining global temperature rise to no more than 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average. And it's a piece of work that we produced in collaboration with one of our major partners, Arup, who I know are also a big partner in this event. And it's now a condition of membership of the cities that are part of the C40 that they will produce a plan and then deliver a plan that is consistent with that Deadline 2020 approach. And whilst we have a long-term perspective, we've very deliberately focused on 2020 as that's the year by which global carbon emissions need to peak and then start to come down very steeply. So why, within that frame, which is very much about climate change, a particular focus on climate mitigation, are we so interested in the work of this conference and of all of the different organisations represented here? Well, the simple answer to that is, of course, that energy use for the creation of potable water and distribution of potable water now represents 7% of total energy consumption. So there's a very direct link between production and distribution of water and energy consumption. And also we see across our member cities huge inefficiency in the current processes. Indeed, water losses can be as high as 70% in some of our member cities, largely due to aging infrastructure, but also increasingly due to disruptions that themselves are caused by climate change. And that is leading to unnecessary, increased, wasteful, further energy consumption around pumping and distribution. There are, of course, very good stories at the other end of the scale. Hong Kong, which has got its very nicely titled Total Water Management Strategy, where at the moment they're focused on installing 160,000 water flow controllers in public housing, government buildings and schools, so mostly within the public sector that they can directly control, but which in addition to greatly reducing leakage, wastage rates, is also going to generate savings of up to $240 million by 2030. So we're seeing within C40 both, I think, some of the extremes of the problem and some of the best and most ambitious solutions, and we are trying to bring those two things together. But secondly, looking at the wastewater sector, which is responsible now for 10% of global anthropogenic emissions of methane. And we tend in the climate world to focus rather too much on carbon, which indeed is the main greenhouse gas. But the second most important is methane. And indeed, methane is now judged to have caused about a quarter, 25% of global warming. Because whilst it doesn't stay in the atmosphere for as long as carbon, but within its shorter lifetime, its 20 years or so lifetime, it has a much more powerful warming effect. And so if we can reduce methane emissions, that has a very significant impact on reducing the short-term impact of climate change, and in particular meeting those deadline 2020 targets. And again, some extreme inefficiency within the wastewater sector in cities. Currently, 80% of all wastewater is released untreated into nature, causing additional environmental damage. But again, to put the positive, we see some really great programs within the C40 cities. In Auckland, where I was quite recently, down in New Zealand, they've got a huge program to upgrade their wastewater treatment through efficiency upgrades, but which also is going to result in 100% biogas utilisation, which will offset the energy requirements for about 22,000 homes, and a program that we're very keen to take to other of our member cities. So there's a pretty now increasingly well-established reason why a focus on water ought to be part of the climate mitigation programme, but also obviously a huge reason to look at water as a central part of climate adaptation, which is also a major focus for C40. Particularly we see with our members that water pattern disruption is often the first sign of serious climate impacts, and 70% of our member cities, the biggest cities in the world, 650 million people, 70% of those cities now tell us that they're already seeing the significant and negative impacts of climate change. And indeed, particularly high on that list of impacts, 64% of our cities face significant risks from flash and surface flooding. And normally at this point, when we're presenting on this subject, we would talk about Jakarta, which sees its losses estimated at about $1 billion annually due to sea level rise, 590,000 people losing their homes in 2007. But of course, we don't need to look at a historic example now, because we can see on our TV screens and across all of our news media what's going on in Mumbai and the devastating floods that are happening there at the moment. And indeed, in the Western world, a big focus on the extraordinary events in Houston. So very much now climate change is having a big and visible effect in the global south, but also in some of the wealthiest cities in the world, which are struggling to cope. But in addition to that risk of flooding, 27%, just over a quarter of our member cities, are already judged to be water stressed. Melbourne, another pretty wealthy, well-resourced city, is now into its 14th year of drought, and despite having a very well-advanced programme of reducing water consumption, tremendously effective citizen engagement campaign that has considerably reduced the wasteful consumption of water, still their water reserves are now 30% below critical levels, and they have some really serious problems facing them in the years to come. And more generally, we see climate change reducing the storage capacity of basins, accelerating snowmelt. Remember, many of our cities rely on snowmelt water for their drinking water, and changing rain patterns that's causing more severe floods and droughts. And this, to then come back to the mitigation agenda, is increasingly pushing cities into more greenhouse gas intensive and costly ocean desalination to provide potable water, or indeed underground pumping to meet demands. And an extreme example here in Lima, in Peru, one of our member cities, a real looming water crisis there. They currently receive less than 1 centimetre of rainfall per year, but even that is, a lot of their water supply has been dependent on now rapidly depleting ice cap reserves from the Andean glaciers, so there's a risk to their water supply, but at the same time, the clean electricity that they've previously been able to rely on through hydroelectricity is now under threat, and indeed there's some consideration of new investment in fossil fuel electricity generation as a result of that, which is something obviously we're trying to help them avoid. So I think we've very much come to the conclusion, particularly in the last few years, that we need to considerably increase our focus on water as part of C40's work and as part of our collaboration with partners, which is why we're really delighted that we have now formed a partnership with the International Water Association. And one of the things that we're going to try and do through that is to move on from where at the moment the way that C40 organises is we're one big network of 91 cities, but within that we have 17 separate thematic networks where mayors have chosen to engage on particular subjects like bus rapid transit, like waste management, and that includes a number of networks that focus on adapting to climate impacts. But now we want to launch 2 new networks, one on urban water management and one on wastewater treatment, and very much part of the reason that we've been here this week is to try and find other partners to come in with us in that endeavour to engage with the major cities of the world around those two aims. But I'll finish just back to where I started, because everything that we're focused on in C40 ultimately comes back to reducing emissions in line with what the science demands, what is in the Paris Agreement to constrain global temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average. And there's a major reason why we should focus on city political leadership in this respect, because our analysis is if every city in the world with a population of over 100,000 followed the targets that the C40 cities have now committed to, it would deliver 40% of the reductions that are necessary to achieve that Paris Agreement. And most critically, it would deliver a very large proportion of the reductions that are possible within the next 10 years. So whilst we see increasing vacillation in some parts of the world, particularly the United States at the moment, at the federal government level, we really see mayors around the world and the major cities pushing on to take a lead on climate change. We now very want to make sure that water is at the heart of that, and be delighted to have the chance to work with all of you in taking that forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And you just ended with, I have a follow-up question, because when I do attend climate change conferences, I find that cities, you're pushing national governments. The Paris Agreement, I think, is to a large extent thanks that cities were that active in that. So what is your next step in continuing that trend, the upcoming climate change conference, also put water at the agenda of the heartland of the climate discussions?
Well, I think that it's right. It's a difficult subject to work on climate change, but it's really energising to be working with cities, because mayors genuinely are very much up for taking political leadership and have found a way of working, of collaborating globally in a very productive way that has eluded national leaders to a certain extent. There's certainly competition between cities, but they're much more open to learning and copying from each other. So primarily what we try and do is to have a positive impact on the national agendas through leading by example, through mayors showing that it is possible to have strong economic growth and take very radical climate action. But I think specifically on the water agenda now, what we'll be hoping to do is do the same that we've done perhaps in the transport sector, is try and show the most radical action, the most impactful action that can be delivered in the major cities of the world, and then try and work with national governments to come in and be partners with her in that, so that we extend what's done in the biggest cities in the world down the chain through the medium and smaller cities.
Thanks a lot. Mark Woods.
Thank you very much.
Now, next, I would like to invite to the podium the chair of World Water Week Scientific Program Committee, Dr. Torkel Jan-Klaus, and a close friend of ours, to give us your reflections of the outcome of the World Water Week seminars. Torkel.
Thank you. Don't worry, they are not my reflections. They are reflections of all the people who participated in the seminars. Thank you, Torkney, and thank you all. I'm pleased to do this because I'm proud of what happened in these seminars. We had 9 seminars with more than 30 co-convening organizations. We had more than 440 abstracts submitted, of which we could only invite 60 for all presentations and 20 for posters. And we had 40 keynote speakers and 60 panelists from co-conveners and others. And a warm thanks. We are very, very grateful to all of you who worked very hard. We have worked for these seminars for over a year, and we are very grateful. That's a rich outcome, and I can only give you the top of the iceberg. I can only give you a flavor. But I got that flavor, of course, from the seminars. But don't worry, there will be reports of each seminar. There will be reports, what I say will be reported, and I think these presentations will be saved. So all of what I miss and all of what I get wrong, you can get better later on. So this is a flavor. Let's take ladies first. That's a good principle, understanding the gender dimension of water and waste. This time, this is seminar number 1. Last year, it was seminar number 9, and that, of course, was not fair. This, of course, is important because they said clearly in this seminar that universal access through gender-sensitive, safely managed water and sanitation is a prerequisite for achieving this 2030 development agenda. Including women in decision-making is still inadequate. There are good policies, but they are not implemented, so we really need regulatory mechanisms for better accountability of doing that. There's a change in community attitudes towards women's leadership is a major factor in empowering women to be part of decision-making, and one of the things that the seminar thought would help is to bring WASH and RWM closer, linking SDG 5 on gender and SDG 6, or target 6.5, closer together. In order for communities to, and especially women, to be respected and involved in water and sanitation, health management, we need to move from the symbolic to the meaningful. So it's not just a question of numbers. It's a question of monitoring and disaggregating data and go beyond the quantitative. And also look at the qualitative measurements of the intangibles such as trust, empowerment, and participation effectiveness. Now, the stage-setting seminar for this week was around water and the circular economy. The circular economy, not unexpected, was concluded to create big opportunities, and as we heard from Mark, I'm sure that that is very much part and parcel of the whole urban agenda. If we are to achieve your ambitions, it's through the circular economy in the cities. It's across sectors for water efficiency, across resource capture, water reuse, and reduction in impacts from pollution and climate change. Technologies to promote the circular economy already exist, but there are social stigma, there are prohibitive regulations, there are financial limitations, and there's a shortage of trained staff, and all of these are major barriers to upscale. Leading-edge models of knowledge sharing, they talked about a lot, to help adopt new circular economy solutions. And again, Mark, what you said, very impressive, that when knowledge is shared, we do better, and you showed that very powerfully. Real-time water quality data came up in practically all the seminars, here to drive innovation, build trust with consumers in the quality of their water. Integrated waste solutions, partnership with other industries, and decentralized model can enable more tailored and innovative innovative solutions. And as is always, talking is big thing, value of water, and you said that in the opening, and you will keep pushing that. And that was also stressed here, that we need to articulate the value of water, financial, social license to operate, carbon reduction, as essential to proactively drive adoption before water becomes really scarce. The future of the circular economy called for decentralized models to expand partnership into new industries, including the agrochemical, the nutrients, the pharmaceuticals. The impact on people and wastewater and health was a very important seminar this time. That seminar recognized target 6.3, which is on wastewater and water quality, as a great opportunity for ambitious systems approach to protect water and health. Far too many chemical and pathogenic pollutants enter our water cycle today and remain untreated before water is disposed of, as you said, Mark, 80%. We need to understand, monitor, and address all dimensions of wastewater management to reduce health and optimize controls throughout reduction, removal, and reuse. In fact, you see many 3 Rs. This is one of them. We get another one later. 3 Rs is running through this. Health impact assessment and sanitation assessment are two of the essential tools to prioritize actions, reduce risk, and coordinate actions. That seminar listed a range of issues that need more research, more work, more improvement if we really are to improve our effectiveness in managing liquid waste and fecal sludge, such as national standards and quality, improvement of the implementation of sanitation and wastewater management, including more efficient pathogen removal, decoupling the technical and natural recycling loops to avoid chemical and microbial contamination caused by reuse, which is a serious concern. And that came again in other seminars as well, addressing the emerging pollutants, such as the pharmaceuticals, and also address future environmental changes, such as climate change, as a threat to health. So how is all this financed? And we had a seminar on that. We usually have a seminar on finance. And here's another 3R. Resource recovery and reuse are usually economically viable and required for most of the SDGs, in fact. But more efforts are needed to internalize the benefits for society and environment to make them bankable. The enabling environment for resource recovery and reuse is constrained by policies, legal regulatory framework, not only in the water sector, but also in health, energy, and agriculture. And that is, of course, a recurrent thing for us in the water sector, to get out of the box and recognize that most of the important decisions are really made in other sectors. And most of the important constraints we find in other sectors. There are a number of encouraging examples of successful projects and increasing, but how do we scale them up, and how do we maintain the success? Innovative public-private partnership for risk sharing, private financing, tariff and tax strategies, green finance, reuse, and so forth were seen as a way forward. And many of these RRR projects actually miss the value of the value chain approach of rigorous market data throughout the supply chain. So more business thinking would actually help increase cost recovery, according to this seminar. We then come to the cities, and after this presentation, I wonder if I have the courage to say what we said about that. But if you couple this with what you said, I guess we get a compelling conclusion that cities is at the heart of this. I mean, smart solutions in cities do require a holistic approach to water management. And here, fragmentation of institutions is seen as a serious barrier. And we need greater collaboration and coordination between the responsible institutions. Best practice for implementing smart solutions in cities indicate that we need to be really problem-based in our approaches and adopt participatory approaches when formulating and tackling urban water challenges. It was noted that informal settlements pay more and receive less in terms of urban water. Relocation is obviously not the solution, but the solution is rather an approach that integrates the informal settlements in a way that recognizes their uniqueness. And decentralized water systems could offer that opportunity. The seminar also recognized that water sits within systems of systems in cities, transport, energy, urban planning, and other things. But we need to be proactive in informing and influencing the urban form, and we need urban integrated system thinking paradigm to achieve SDGs 6 and 11. And of course, Habitat 3's new urban agenda is part of this whole thinking and integrated urban water management. Moving to agriculture, they recognize a few telling facts. In fact, 10 to 15% of irrigated croplands globally use indirect and untreated wastewater. But in fact, less than 0.5% of treated wastewater is applied to irrigated croplands. It was clear from this seminar that wastewater must be considered as a resource, and where applied, provide the sufficient nutrients, of course, of growing the crops. And this again contributes to achieving SDG 6.3, as long as possible health risk can be controlled. So, of course, the discussions on health and wastewater happen many places. And of course, we are not here talking just about SDG 6, but also, of course, SDG 2 on food. This seminar advocated for a change in mentality. We need to make resource recovery and reuse a treatment goal in its own right while protecting health. And it stressed that increasing social acceptability and trust along the entire value chain, from waste to food, we need to be responsive to the divergent interests and needs among different stakeholders. This year, we discussed a lot. We talk about industry or we take a specific one. We argued a bit and ended on textile. I'm sure this sheep agrees with us that that's important. And we do that because the textile industry is, I think, the second largest polluter of all industries. This seminar was really a novelty. They said that the textile sector is converting its efforts to address environmental challenges, but they need a common roadmap towards achieving SDG 6 and SDG 12 on sustainable consumption production. And that calls for a unified vision in the sector. And they say that, yeah, we know where we shouldn't go, but we still need better understanding where we should go. Responsibility of water needs to be well defined and understood in the textile sector. So systemic barriers to good governance in the global supply chains and effective international development approaches need to be sort of taken up much more. The textile sector must ask bigger questions regarding business models to fulfill obligations towards SDGs 6 and 12. The sector, and that's news to me, but makes sense, is moving away from the traditional CSR, corporate social responsibility, to develop and inspire true sustainability values along all operations in the chain. And to this, indicators for environment, social, and governance are key. We had a seminar on water pollution regulations, which looked at the mix of economic, regulatory, and administrative tools that exist, and noted that this requires more persuasion and policy coherence across sectors if we really are to achieve outcomes. Improving water quality from source to sea requires managing both point and diffuse sources, integrating with land use, planning and water quantity management. In fact, source to sea was a big thing in the opening. By 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans, and that's the freshwater problem, because 90% of it comes from land. So we are starting to be much more serious about this issue. And the contaminants of emerging concerns is a challenge, both traditional policy regulation and existing wastewater treatment infrastructure. They noted here that the essential tools to guide formulation, implementation, and regulations include innovative monitoring methodologies, safe, effect-based threshold values, international cooperation, and source-directed precautionary policies. Finally, without governance, we go nowhere, and the final seminar was on governance as a key to sustainable development. Now we have the target 6.5 integrated water resources management at all levels by 2030, but we need to revitalize RWM in its current form. We have the theoretical and structural elements in place, but we need to now concentrate on accelerating the actual work and serve people in the process. And to this, leadership is really vital to make progress. Leadership from politicians, from professionals, from communities. Regulation is an important element of governance, which we also had a whole regulation seminar on wastewater. Clear data keeps coming up, collected regularly and available openly are crucial for transparency and monitoring. If people know their roles, then they can achieve great things together. And we need to be clear on our moral compass here. Behave ethically, promote integrity, and fight corruption. So in closing, it's hard to say in one shot what is the story, but I go back to the opening. We had Krista Fuglsang, the astronaut, showed us a spaceship. And how do you live in a spaceship if you don't think circular? You can't. And you saw the spaceship, and then you saw Earth below. So at all levels. And in fact, Krista's answer was the title of this week, Water and Waste, Reduce and Reuse. So the title was fitting. There is no such thing as waste, this week told us, only resources. Even brown can be gold. We need to apply good governance to circular economy, to improve the health for both people and environment, and to achieve the goals of the 2030 Development Agenda. And in Stockholm, we look at the 2030 development broadly, SDGs, Paris, and other things. But I think we noted here, on a happy note, the glass is not half empty, the glass is half full, and it's filling up. The seminars noted things are happening, and let's build on those successes and fill up the glass. Now, so this is a commercial to come back next year, because these seminars tell great stories. I know what next year will be all about, but talking will kill me if I tell you now. So I will keep that a secret a little bit. So thank you very much for your attention.
You come up. Thank you very much, Torkil. Always an inspiration for us. And good morning to you all. We are now going to introduce and welcome our rapporteurs. If we all think that we are tired after this week, I think this is a group that has probably even put in more effort than all of us have. I would like to welcome you all up on stage, please, to introduce yourselves. So, yeah, should we take it? Yeah, sure. The further, du tar längst bort.
I'll take this one.
Yeah. Gunilla, kom bara.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm Gunilla Björklund, and I'm one of the team leaders for the social team.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Burton. I'm a part of the social team as well, and I'm from the US, and I'm excited to be here.
My name is Anna Karin. I live in Sweden and study at KTH.
Hi, I'm Sohaib Mohammed Ibrahim. I'm from Sudan, and I study at Lund University.
I'm Rameki from Sudan. I study at KTH.
Hello, I'm Sophie de Bruin from the Netherlands, and I work for the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency.
Hi, I'm Nina Ågren from Finland, and I study in the University of Jyväskylä.
Hi, Anja Haya from Germany, currently working on a shed floor diagram for Nairobi.
Hi, I'm Ana Maria Nunes from the Inter-American Development Bank. I'm the other lead for this group, and I'm very excited to be here.
I'm Miriam Otu from Ghana, researcher at the International Water Management Institute, co-lead for the economics team, and this is our team.
Hi, I'm Marika Samuelson, studying at Imperial College London from Sweden and Laos.
Hi, my name is Greta Marin Wistrand. I'm a physical geographer from Lund University, Sweden.
Hi, I'm Bella Strid from Sweden, and I am a student at Uppsala University.
Hi, I'm Andrea Beck. I'm a student at MIT from Germany.
Lindsay Higgins, I'm a PhD student at Stockholm University, and I'm from the United States.
Thank you. Carlos Diaz from Peru. I am Principal Executive at CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America.
Hi, I am Javier Mateo Sagasta from the International Water Management Institute, one of the colleagues for the environmental team, and this is the environmental team.
Thank you. Good morning, my name is Dan Katal-Minerva. I'm from Global Water Partnership.
Hello, I'm Koen van Geijn from Wageningen University in the Netherlands.
Hi, I'm Hao Yu from Lund University, originally come from China.
Good morning, my name is Hannah Reid and I work for the Water Authority of the Cayman Islands, where I am from.
Hey, I'm Katharina. I'm studying in Luleå Technical University as PhD student, and I'm from Germany.
Hi, my name is Jessica Page. I'm originally from South Africa, and I'm a master's student at KTH here in Stockholm.
Good morning, Onuma Punpanit. I'm a PhD student in Uppsala University from Thailand.
Thank you very much, everyone. And now let's all give them a very, very big hand. It is the case that without our rapporteurs and without Torkel's guidance, not much would get done here in the same way. Going into World Water Week, we asked our rapporteurs to reflect on a hypothesis and to kind of bring with them, do they have assumptions coming into the week? And will the week change these opinions? The question we asked is, how will greater focus on water and waste, reduce and reuse, help achieving the 2030 agenda? And as you all have, or some of you at least, have noticed, there are paper slips. We unfortunately did not have entirely enough for all of you, but we'd like the audience to engage a little bit to help identify these assumptions and whether you agree with them or not. So we will be presenting the assumptions for each one of these teams. We have the social team, we have the economic team, and we have the environmental team. And the assumptions that they had going in will be introduced one by one. There's 3 for each group. And I'd like all of you to raise your hand with a yes if you agree with the green note, or simply raise your hand, and with the red note if you don't agree to this assumption. And also, I can't quite see here, Kaisa, so if you help me a little bit to gauge the audience also. Thank you very much. So, the first assumption from the social team. So, assuming that the assumption was that they had going in is that the human-centered implementation of reuse and redistribution of safe drinking water and sanitation will substantially assist the 2030 agenda. So do you agree or do you disagree? Wow. What I can see, it's unanimous, I would say. Thank you. The next assumption was, would increased resilient infrastructure, both in terms of technical hardware and human capacity, be a key agent? Yes or no? Again, thank you very much. And then the final one was that there is a need for more opportunities of both social and economic development in order to ensure the agenda. Thank you. Oh, we have actually a couple of no's in that case. Thank you. Thank you very much. So please, Gunilla and Jasmine.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's been such an honor to be here this week in a host of capacities. I'm a toilet product designer from the Georgia Institute of Technology. I am a current MSc in Public Health candidate at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I'm the founder and president of a social startup for sanitation called Wish for Wash, and I've had the distinct pleasure of being on the social rapporteur team for this week. So I guess reflecting on our hypothesis that you all just voted on, the genesis of kind of how we came to these ideas was human-centered implementation being really rooted in cultural context and understanding the people. And then I guess in terms of resilient infrastructure, really focusing on both the hardware and the software in terms of technology, as well as investing in people and human capacity and health. So those were kind of the ways that we came about this hypothesis. And I guess as a team, we had the great opportunity of attending a host of sessions related to social justice, health equity, and human rights. And I guess coming out of this week, we can say the following. That over 4 billion people don't have access to safely managed sanitation, that over 2 billion people don't have access to safely managed water, and that centuries of history are really rooted in conflict related to water and the protection of water sources. And these statistics and kind of histories are disproportionately affecting marginalized communities, whether that's gender, whether that's children, whether that's socioeconomic or cultural minority groups. So these are some things that we as a sector recognize, and it's great to kind of hear that reoccurring theme throughout the different sessions. We've also recognized that there is a disproportionate representation in terms of the workforce, in terms of representation within the sector, as well as just data in general. And so that's really something that was also great to hear. And I think kind of in light of the enormity of the problems that still are amongst us, it's really kind of an exciting opportunity and time to be in this sector and to be a part of this work. Because there's been really overarching positive messaging around how we can best amplify the voices of these marginalized groups, how we can have social inclusion agendas in our programming and in our planning for moving forward, as well as how we can work with coordinated efforts so that we can effectively create sustainable change. So it's been really exciting to be a part of this week, and I would like to pass it on to our lead rapporteur, who will talk about some of the current challenges, some of the key learnings from this week, as well as some recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now you've heard one of our junior rapporteurs, and I can assure you that the rest of the group were as enthusiastic as Jasmine, and they have done a very, very good job. So it's been a bit difficult to pick up some of the real issues from what they have produced, because they did go to a lot of sessions and they made reports from all the sessions, both written reports and oral reports when we had our meetings. So as Katarina was saying, we started by doing early morning meetings, but then we realized that it's fresher in the minds if we do it in the afternoon after the session. So the young rapporteurs yesterday used the opportunity of relaxing somewhat in the mingle and dance. But I can assure you that they have been
and that
very
was a good party too,
otherwise.
so that's great. And it was a good party for everyone too, so
Yeah,
it's excellent.
it was a good party for everyone, obviously. Okay, what I'm going to report on is what they have found when it comes to the current challenges. And part of that, Torkil already has mentioned, because one of the issues that they have reported quite a lot from is, of course, the issue of gender aspects. There has been a lot of sessions with the gender aspect as one of the important part. And the young rapporteurs have been mentioning that the women-intensive water governance is something that's needed, that is a challenge. What is the women's role is something that has to be decided upon. And there was also one session saying, is wastewater a she? And then we got the quotation to that, saying that wastewater is a he from labor perspective, but a she from victim perspective. I've seen before, we didn't discuss it during this, but that carrying water in many countries is a women's task if they have to go, if they had to walk. But if they have a bike or any kind of car, then it's a men's task.
Interesting.
Well, there was a lot more on the gender aspect, but I'm not supposed to talk too much. I have a tendency of doing that sometimes. Well, not just women. There are other groups that has been dealt with during the sessions. Of course, the youth has been mentioned, but also the indigenous people and the sacred, I pronounced that a bit different when we discussed it in the group. Yes. But the religious part of the society also have special religious leaders that has been discussed during some of the sessions, and that is important as well. Then we come to another aspect that is a challenging aspect where I wouldn't need to dwell too much because Torkel has been talking about that as well. The health aspects. And there was a session on discussion on freshwater health index. And there was also a session on a health emergency perspective index, which is something that came out of the Ebola occasions. The indexes, of course, has linkages to the SDGs. And there has been a lot of mentioning of the different SDGs during these sessions. And that's, of course, mentioned. We also had coverage of sessions on water insecurity and conflict. And some years back, water insecurity and conflict should have been much more narrow than it has been during this session. Because at that time, the water insecurity and conflict was very much regarded as being conflict and insecurity in between countries and in between states. But during the sessions, it's been a lot on the water insecurity within countries. The water insecurity for women, the water insecurity for other groups. And the conflict could rise also from that kind of water insecurity. And I think that's a bit new, and that, well, not quite new, but at least it's not something that has been discussed at World Water Weeks many years. And this is something that is important. And I will come back to that. Of course, there were sessions that dealt with capacity building, education, and awareness building. That's kind of traditional. because that is an issue that needs to be dealt with. But it has partly been dealt with a bit different this year. On the most important findings, I think that one of the most important findings that I also have seen in the reports from the young professionals is this more wide perspective. And it has been more of an integrated perspective, but it's also been a wider perspective. And the example I gave from the water and conflict is one of the examples of that.
Now, concluding remarks from your group?
Yeah. The concluding remark is the recommendation on the way forward. That's rather easy, and I can say it very, very shortly. Please continue to broaden the sessions this way. Excellent. And please continue to include the integrated perspective as has been done.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Torkild, do you have any immediate reactions, thoughts, responses?
No, I can only say that great minds think alike. I mean, the discussions in the seminars and the discussion you saw are converging. I think maybe one of the things that I think has come here is that with the SDGs, the 17, the 169 targets and the 250 specific indicators, and countries signing up to that, we can no longer just, as we said, state the big numbers and make the symbolic statement. We are forced now to be much more specific and concrete and turn this into something that is actionable. And I think in this area of gender, for example, of getting youth more involved, and dealing with conflict at the local, recognizing informal institutions, for example, as well as formal. All of these things should go beyond, we should walk the talk. And I think the SDG agenda is compelling us to do that, and we need to be sharper when in our conclusions and more operational. And I think I saw that's something that is beginning to happen.
Excellent.
So I think that's
very good.
we think alike.
Okay. Now, we'll move on to the economics team. Carlos and Lindsay, they, going into the week, responding to the hypothesis, they formulated questions. Will safely treated wastewater become our new drinking water? Can the private sector, oh, sorry, we should vote. We have to vote on that, sorry. So, is this a yes or no question? Please raise your hands again. So will safely treated wastewater become our new drinking water? Oh, now we have a little more diverse views here. Very interesting. Thank you very much for that. Can the private sector fill the financing gap for sustainable wastewater management? Yes or no? Again, very diverse, pretty much 50-50 it looks from up here, very unscientific. The next and the last question is decentralization the future of wastewater management? Oh, I would have to say that the yes is in the majority actually, but very interesting. So thank you for that. And Carlos and Lindsay, we look forward to your reflections on this.
Sure. Thank you very much. Again, Carlos Diaz, lead rapporteur of this team, excellent team. We got a lot of information, and so we are going to stick to what it was agreed for this precious time that you are giving us. So the junior rapporteurs of the team has covered about 73 sessions, 73, between seminars, events, and showcases. they have been very busy actually this week. No? And this is what the economic team of rapporteurs would like to report back to the audience. And please, Lindsay, could you kick off?
Thank you, Carlos. And good morning, everyone. I'm feeling a bit controversial based on the responses to our questions. But these 3 questions were addressed in many of the sessions that we attended. Wastewater has the potential to be seen not as a burden, but a valuable resource. Over 80% of wastewater is discharged back into the environment without proper treatment. Untreated sewage pollutes our environment and can release more greenhouse gas emissions than those of standard treatment processes. It follows that in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, it is essential that management and reuse of wastewater are prioritized. When considering wastewater reuse, a key barrier to progress can be public opinion, this yuck factor that we demonstrated. In the case of Singapore's New Water, a national, multi-year, and politically backed campaign was necessary before treated wastewater could be seen and accepted as a source of drinking water. Beyond drinking water, wastewater has immense potential to be used in other sectors. In industry, waste from one company may be considered a resource for another, and this was highlighted by a symbiosis project in Denmark, where water is cycled for use through multiple industrial plants before it's even required to be treated again. In agricultural terms, wastewater has great potential for use in irrigation, but also as a source of nutrients. Depending on the country and beyond public opinion, there may be regulatory gaps or restrictions. When there's a mismatch between the quality of treated wastewater and between its use, regulations can represent a barrier. Additionally, there is general consensus that issues of financing in the wastewater sector must be addressed in order to move forward. And I'll pass back to Carlos for more on the financing gaps.
Thank you. Also controversial. So to begin with, I will say that we realized that when we posed the question, we were not clear about what the magnitude of financing the gap we were referring to. This week, we have heard the message that with the introduction of the SDGs, the financing gap in the water sector has increased to the magnitude of billions to trillions, but there is still not one universally accepted projected amount. Moreover, do these estimates already take into account what will be needed to innovate and implement the SDGs in a circular economy fashion, or does this just refer to the amount needed to extend and sustain properly the current type of infrastructure that we are using at the moment?
Very interesting.
One message that came out strongly was that the gap is indeed substantial, and the private sector will have to play some role in addressing this gap. In the sessions we attended, private sector representatives did express interest in providing much needed capital for resource recovery and reuse. However, there were some areas of unclarity about enabling environments, risks and uncertainty, financial mechanisms, bankability of projects, and matching the right kind of projects with the right kind of investors in terms of objective, scales, and timelines. Basically, there seems to be a consensus that the private sector is going to be involved where there is a business case. Beyond conventional approaches, new innovative business models and financial mechanisms such as blended finance and climate finance should be explored while keeping in mind the need for simplicity. The key is to turn economically beneficial projects into bankable projects, meaning that they are also financially viable in order to attract different sources of finance. I think Torquil
Yeah,
already
very
touched
good.
upon that point in the
Yeah.
presentation. Importantly, the dialogue between the water community and the finance community that has been strongly promoted this week needs to be sustained and intensified in the form of roundtables, databases, and other venues. Despite the increased role of the private sector in financing RRR, the public sector needs to remain strongly involved to fulfill its role of ensuring the provision of basic services in an equitable and inclusive fashion. If it is true that the public sector has to remain in the driver's seat, we need to build the capacity of the public sector to play this role effectively, in developing countries especially, in the areas of financial management and governance, including regulation and technical decentralization. And I go back to Lindsay.
Decentralization and centralization should not be seen as one versus the other. In order to achieve SDG 6, as well as other targets, we need to explore how to best reach different segments of society. In order to reach the poorest of the poor, decentralization holds potential because implementation timelines are shorter and related capital costs are relatively lower than centralized systems. As an example, decentralized systems were noted as the way to go forward for wastewater management in peri-urban and rural populations in the near future. The efficiency of decentralized over centralized systems is highly context-specific. Often, centralized systems benefit from the nature of economics of scale. Trade-offs and specific objectives of implementing entities must be considered. When planning and implementing decentralized systems, more emphasis needs to be placed on local stakeholder engagement, community acceptance, and buy-ins to ensure sustainability. To re-emphasize, governance is about co-creation. By allowing people to co-create, you create local ownership.
Thank you so much. Torquil, reflections.
Yeah, I think this was really interesting because when we had the social team, all the cards were green. When we have the financial teams, it's a mixture. And I noticed, I saw Diane's on one where it was red and others were green. And I think maybe part of it is that the statements were too sweeping. I mean, Krista, he drank his urine in the spaceship, but half of you said no.
Yeah.
But I think probably if we looked at the seminars, this public acceptance is not a quick fix,
No,
and
definitely
2030 is not
not.
far away. So I guess
That's at the heart of it.
the red and green is also, it's not that simple. And probably 2030 is too ambitious. And then the other one on the private sector, right? It was very clear from the seminars that the private sector alone can't do it. And that a lot of the service to the poor is still a big challenge for the public sector. So it's an either or, and it was green and red. And I also think, you know, the question of decentralized models, again, as you said, it's context specific. Some of the sort of more tricky solutions for the marginalized, decentralized solutions is the only way. But for the big urban challenges, maybe not. So I think it's very interesting, and I think the discussions in the seminars also divided people.
Exactly.
And that's why we're here. We want to argue.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we move to the environmental team, Danka and Koen, and you are all ready to vote. And I'm paraphrasing them a bit. As population grows and urbanization increases, waste and wastewater will grow and needs to be made an asset. Do you agree or do you disagree? There are some dissenting views, but majority are in agreement with this statement, with this assumption. The second one is World Water Week will show that wastewater is not a waste anymore, but a resource being adequately and safely used. And I appreciated that one myself very much. Do you agree? Yeah, again, most agree, a few dissenting views. And finally, to reduce and reuse waste, a combination of approaches, legal, economic, administrative training, etc., will work better than only regulation. So again, the case for an integrated approach. Please, environmental team.
Thank you. I'm surprised that we had almost unanimous votes. However, in our group, you will now listen to our results. I'm going to share my presentation with Cohen. We were 7 in group, and in total, over this week, we attended 75 sessions.
Wow.
It was very busy. We met again every morning. Well, I saw that most of on the first hypothesis, which we created in the day 1, where we didn't know what to expect. Most of you put the green up, but our results are yes, 50%, no, 50%. And the arguments for that yes, waste and wastewater are considered to have a big potential to be the resource. But I would like to emphasize the big potential rather than actually being the resource. And no is that too much waste and wastewater still end up in the environment. The very similar situation was in one of the sessions where there was, before the session, 88% of the audience thought the reuse was the solution to water scarcity. However, after the seminar, at the end of the session, this percentage dropped and only 52% thought that it is the solution and 49% thought that the portfolio of solution is needed. But big no comes because of emerging pollutants. We still have little information and knowledge about the past and fate, and there is a lack of instruments to address them. So probably it will be a big challenge to our first hypothesis. Obviously, we try to define what are challenges and opportunities, and I'm not going to repeat them as they were already reported by Margaret and by you, probably only to say that the severe pollution of rivers deteriorated ecosystem and increased the health impact. This is still the fact, and you have many drivers to that. As opportunities, the waste and wastewater contain water, nutrients, carbon. So it's waiting for us to be used. There are technological innovations already being applied, but they could help a lot. Come with findings. We have a shared presentation.
Thank you. So addressing our second hypothesis, our findings of actually reuse in practice right now. We heard about a lot of cases, and we grouped them into 3 clusters to make it a bit more easy to grasp. So these are agriculture use, urban use, and industry use, and then we have the case of textile especially. So first for agriculture, we found that actually there is already a lot of reuse of water in agriculture, also historically, of course. And this can be done in 4 different ways. So you can have reuse of treated or untreated water, and you can have indirect or direct use. And indirect here refers to discharge of wastewater into rivers and then reuse kind of downstream. And actually non-treated indirect use is the biggest reuse of wastewater right now. As you can imagine, this brings along health concerns. And we heard that there are already guidelines in place for safe reuse, but it's clear that these are, in a lot of cases, not yet implemented. Another take-home message for reuse in agriculture we found was that we all live downstream. Even though your house is upstream, you consume food that is produced downstream, and especially for the new emerging pollutants, it's really everybody's problem. So moving on to reuse in urban areas, it's a little bit more of a future look. We think that in greening and bluing cities of the future, these cities can be fed with reused water. And also these future cities will have different types of utility leaders in which communities are engaged, and also multi-purpose facilities are used to manage the water. So this means that in these places, in these facilities, communities can come together and learn about water and get connected to water. So for the perhaps smaller cities and less densely populated areas, we think that alternative and more decentralized techniques are a good opportunity. And these can also present or really facilitate more small-scale reuse and recovery options. So now, Danka will tell you about the industry case.
Yeah, because I was a very strong member of scientific program committee to defend the textile industry to be on stage. And why it is like that? We should realize textile industry is the second biggest polluter of the environment. Yeah? And it's something what we have on us. And from the cotton to our fashion and up to the detergents, which especially women we are using. However, very positive findings which we found, and I will pick up one and I will name it directly, Sweden Textile Water Initiative. It was very impressive, and I think it must go to the report because this is achievement of and the big giants. 40 Swedish textile industrial giants, which are all over the world, they are able to save 2.5 million of cubic meter of water saved annually, with 1,140 tons of chemicals reduced annually, and with 12,000 team members contributed to a return of 89%. So these numbers, sometimes we do not like numbers, but they are tangible and they are concrete.
Thank you very much for that specific illustration, Danka. Appreciate it.
One more slide I have, because we were asked, what is new this year? And the question was given to me because this is probably my 10th water week. and I saw that anything could be new, yeah? But it is, yes. What we noted, and probably as a conclusion and a message to take home, that yes, there was already documentation of accelerated progress of countries, developing countries and transition countries, which are already implementing SDGs. I would again name some of them: China, Uganda, Colombia, Jordan, Kenya. These are evidence which we saw in our seminars. Maybe we didn't capture everything. Koen, looking ahead. The final slides.
So me as a youth looking ahead and also addressing our third hypothesis, I think in general we found that there is not really a need to make new instruments and frameworks, but we do really need to focus on the enforcement and the engagement of the public, again, with moral persuasions. And if we do this in combination with innovative approaches like green infrastructure, decentralized techniques, we just heard some, there are many more, then yeah, we can really look ahead positively. Also, to mention it again, community-focused solutions are very important. We have one very nice example of a story we heard where there were new wastewater treatment, or I should say wastewater pipes installed, and the local people, they destroyed these pipes immediately after they were built because clearly they did not think it was a solution. Just somebody who built the pipes thought it was a solution. That's, of course, yeah, not a solution. So finally, for looking ahead, we want to conclude that to do good policy and to engage the public, you need a good scientific background and have strong data to communicate and to motivate and convince people. Looking at the SDGs, we believe from everything what we heard that if we set the right priorities, if we do investments and we have a strong and if we have the same vision, then we can, by investing in reuse, reduce and recycle, do a very big push towards several SDGs, among which where we mainly focused on are the SDGs 6, 13, 14 and 15. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Torkel, last reflections.
Yeah, I have one very positive one and then a puzzling one. I think all the green shows that we are all in the same circular economy church, right? Everybody. Yeah. But we don't go into that church with our eyes closed. Mm-hmm. And I think particularly, so the emerging chemicals, Every day, every year, something crops up that we didn't think about before that is in there and was never. In Denmark, I'm Danish, last week we found a new pesticide. We never looked for it, we never treated for it. One waterwork found it, and now, hey, we have to do something about it. And this is going to happen again and again. And therefore, I think that we're in the church, but with caution. And I also think, you know, the number we saw is that 0.3% of treated wastewater is used, while 10 to 15% is untreated. And that, again, it's a word of caution here. But I mean, everything else, I think we were very much in tune with what was said in the seminar. But my question, I didn't hear climate change at all. I heard SDGs, I didn't hear Paris. I mean, the 2030 agenda is also Paris, and I think in the environment area, I'm surprised if you did not pick that up, because a lot of the challenge and a lot of the policies that we need to address the environmental will have to be related to how we do the NDCs and the Paris Agreement. So it's a question to the team, since you didn't mention it, didn't you hear it, or do we just, it puzzles me.
Yeah.
Maybe I can be allowed to ask that question to the team.
Yeah, quick response, because now
environmental team, yes, we didn't attend those seminars. Only 75 of the arsenal of the events, and these 75 didn't mention, or if they mentioned, we didn't focus. Of course, you cannot say that no, yeah, but we found that we are going to report on more interesting stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. A big hand to all of you, and thank you very much for your work. Thank you very much for your work and your engagement. And now I'd like to ask Dr. Bose to come up to present the winner of the poster competition.
Good morning, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. This is the fifth time that I'm here to perform as the chair of the poster jury. It's also the last time. I've completed 2 terms as a member of the SPC, and so I'm stepping down this year. And that made it a time to reminisce a little bit. I was thinking of the 4 previous winners of posters that I've had under my watch. Policy study on water footprint and virtual water was the first one, student from Tony Allen's group. The next one was an innovative technology for wastewater treatment plants on a Greek island. We had the testing of smart pumps in Africa by the group from Oxford. And then last year, the winner was Mr. Philip Cruz from the Technical University in Dortmund, managing extremes, planning for water resources in San Diego. Eerily sort of predictive of maybe what's happening in Houston right now. So that list of 4 really also reflects the diversity that we see throughout the World Water Week, and it's a little microcosmos of that diversity. So what I will miss most, I think, of working, doing this job as chair of the poster jury will be that I've been working with teams of young water professionals. That has been very exciting and stimulating. And this year we had another fantastic team made up of Kanokpan Jongjarp, Marij Swart, Matthijs Wessels, and Shubra Batarchi. They are in the room. I would like them to stand up, and maybe you should give them a big hand for the work they did on the poster jury. All right, this year it seemed we had less posters and they were of more mixed quality. In my opinion, that means that we need to step up the resources and efforts for research in wastewater management for the coming years. And so we met with the poster jury yesterday at lunchtime, and we came to the unanimous conclusion for the 2017 Siwi World Water Week Poster Prize with the following motivation. It was the poster we selected had a clearly defined research question, and that was elaborated into a sound research project. We had a well-designed methodological approach. We saw clear and robust conclusions. And what we very much liked was the applicability of the recommendations. They come in a balanced sense with both short and long-term perspectives. So the winner of the 2017 Poster Prize is Mr. Yolwin Jet Perales of the University of the Philippines at Diliman for the poster Evaluating Hazards and Risks of Water Resources in Sultan Kudarat, Philippines. Please come on stage. Okay, and I'd like to ask you to maybe in 1 minute give us a quick review of the conclusions and recommendations that came out of your research.
So yeah, my project is entitled Evaluating Hazards and Risks of Water Sources in Sultan Kudarat. So it aims to quantitatively determine the levels of toxic heavy metals in the 2 major rivers and seas in the province. And results showed that there is heavy metals are present in all of the water bodies I studied in significant concentrations. There is also a significant increase on the number of diseases in the communities living beside these water bodies as compared to those who don't. The quality of water is also inversely proportional to the number of industrial activities in the area as well as to an increase of the population in the area. As a recommendation, stricter policies and regulations should be created because sadly currently there's none specific for these water bodies, and then proper enforcement of these laws should be made to protect these water bodies from further deterioration and alleviate the problems associated to it. Thank you so much, and this is a very wonderful opportunity for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is yours. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, and I think back to Torben. Thanks, Torben.
Thank you, Robert, and congratulations to the Siwi Poster Award winner. That brings us to an end of this first session, or first part of our concluding session. Now we will have a short break. We will resume at 11 a.m. sharp for the final session of this World Water Week. So a break, coffee, come back at 11. Thanks.
Well, please take your seats, and we will kick off this second session. Siwi is a facilitator, and it's very important for us to engage with various organizations, whether they're from public, private sector, civil society. Therefore, I'm very, very happy to welcome up to the stage our key collaborating partners for this World Water Week. Please, IWMI, International Water Management Institute, International Water Association, and Development Bank of Latin America, with representatives, Dr. Pei Drexel for IWMI, President Diane Daras from International Water Association, and Vice President of Social Development and Environment, Jose Carrera. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to reflect a little bit and have our partners specifically reflect on their experiences this week. And as concluding remarks, I will also bring to you should we say, the key points from the various high-level plenaries that have taken place throughout this week. So, welcome, and we appreciate your support and engagement immensely. Dr. Drexel, I believe I will start with you. What are your take-home messages from World Water Week regarding, and particularly, of course, regarding the interlinking with SDGs and your agricultural perspective?
Oh, is it on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay, great. That's, of course, for us as an agricultural research institute, a very, very challenging and very interesting question. And we have a significant stake when we look at the SDGs, of course.
One second. Could the assistants please close the doors because it's making a lot of noise this way? Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. From the IMI perspective, we have a significant stake in achieving SDG 2, which is on food security. And achieving food security, and then looking at the theme of this Water Week, sanitation, wastewater, there can be positive and negative linkages. And when I maybe start with the positive side, achieving food security needs water. Yeah, but we are in times of increasing water scarcity, we are in times of urbanization and climate change. And in particular, when we look at urban and peri-urban areas, where there's intensive agriculture these days, but on the other hand, there's also much water overuse, much water pollution, and the aquifers are shrinking. Then we really have to look at wastewater in many regions, because as it was said from the rapporteurs, wastewater is the only water source which will increase in volume with population growth and with water consumption. And so there are many areas, especially more arid ones, where wastewater will be key for achieving SDG 2 and food security. But it's not only the water. So while there we could say that SDG 6 is actually a milestone for achieving SDG 2, it's not only the water, it's that wastewater has resources, as it was mentioned, has nutrients, has biosolids, and many soils are very poor. And it would be very beneficial to capture all these resources. And there are many positive examples, like we ourselves, we just established and opened a large industrial scale size co-composting plant which tries to bring nutrients back into the production cycle. And there are similar plants of similar size by Sanergy in Kenya, or there's a plant which is transforming fecal sludge into energy by Pivo in Rwanda. So there are fantastic examples, and I think we should really try to work along this line. But while the linkage to food security is more the bright side, there's also a dark side, and just a word on the dark side. The dark side concerns then more food safety. So food safety is part of achieving food security. And for me here at the week, it was most interesting to understand the scale. There were new data out, and the scale of the food safety challenge. And just to visualize it, if we might look here just at this big screen, you have here this wonderful big screen, and we could imagine that this big screen represents, optimistically speaking, 1 million hectare, which we have currently under treated wastewater reuse in agriculture. This big screen is then the screen from which we take all these success stories, and this is the screen which we like to enlarge under the SDG 6.3. And now we can just imagine, we put a second screen here, so that's another million hectare, and we put another screen there. And I think all around this room we could put maybe 10 screens, so 10 million hectare, but we have the gallery. So put also all along the gallery another screens, and we have 20 million hectares. And then we put other screens here on the ceiling. And then maybe we reach 30 million hectares all over these screens. And these 30 million hectares, that's the area where currently untreated wastewater is used mostly in diluted form. And the scale is for me very fascinating. That was my key take-home message, that it's very important to have a vision. It's very important to know where we want to go. But we have a high responsibility, and there are many skeletons in our cupboards, and we should not forget those. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very provocative picture. Thank you very much for that. Vice President Carrera, so what are your take-home messages from your perspective?
Well, thank you very much. I would say that there are five takeaways from this seminar. First is planning. Second, no silver bullet. Third, we need to look at the whole picture. Fourth, we have to look for partners. And fifth, there has to be an effort to find innovative solutions of business and different business schemes. And let me elaborate a little bit on that.
Absolutely, thank you.
First, on planning, and I want to share some personal anecdote that happened to me this morning. Yesterday and this morning, I was preparing for this session, and I was making some notes, and I arrived this morning to this wonderful place, and I realized I forgot my glasses. So I couldn't read and write and edit anything of my notes, so I have to rush during the break to buy some glasses. And now I am allowed to
Please go ahead.
Go and think a little bit more about this. Anyways, planning is very important. If we want to think about reuse, of course, it is much better if you have and you take into account that what you will use now and the way how you will use will need to be treated later for a future reuse. Therefore, you should take that into account, and it will help you to be more careful in the way how do you approach these issues of using the water. Secondly, I say that there is no silver bullet, of course. In the case of Latin America, we have different geographical areas, and within the urban sector, we have different types of cities. Let me give you just two cities as an example. Buenos Aires is just by the Rio de la Plata, which is an immense river. They have lots of water, and probably the case for reuse will be quite difficult. On the other side, you have Lima. Lima is a city of 10 million inhabitants. It is the second largest city on a desert. Therefore, the approach for this city, it's much more likely to be realistic when you think about reuse of water. Therefore, again, we have to be very careful when planning and requesting different approaches to the cities according to the realities. Third, we have to look at the whole picture, look at the watershed, and not only my territorial space. And we were having a discussion in the Ion Lac session, and one of the panelists mentioned that in the Paraná River, that is a huge river in Latin America that goes through Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil, there was the perception that you do not need it very much to treat the wastewater because of the huge amounts of water, it was going to be done naturally. However, that was not the case. And recent studies found that even though there is a large amount of water that goes through the river, but the chemical analysis and the studies were telling the people of the cities through the river that they have to take into account that as well. The water is not clear anymore. Fourth, I think that we have to look for partnerships. Partnerships, in our case, with other banks, with other institutions, so that we can work together and find better solutions. We are collaborating perhaps with the World Bank and doing some studies in policy analysis and some trying to move ahead in the knowledge agenda together that we think is much more productive. And finally, we think that we have to be more innovative. There are many things in the financial area that we should look into and perhaps find new solutions for the same type of problems, or look at the problems from different perspectives and therefore find in different ways of tackling them.
Thank you. Just a spontaneous question, and I think, the issue of reuse, I think, in the agricultural sector, there's an understanding that there is quite a bit of nutrients that could be put to use, but from a bank perspective, the social, the need to socially educate on those issues, how do you perceive that from a bank perspective?
Well, from our perspective, it is at the heart of our agenda to work on educating the society that we are in contact with. Because, as a development bank, the most important issue is to have a sustainable development. And having a sustainable development means a development that is inclusive. And you know, in Latin America, even though we have made tremendous efforts in reducing poverty and inequality, we still are the most unequal region in the world. And one of the most divisible faces of inequality is social exclusion. Of what? Of water, of sanitation, education, transport, housing, etc. Therefore, water is at the forefront of our top priorities in the agenda of development because it has impacts on education, it has impacts on health and many other things, and therefore that is why we think it's very important to also help to the communities in the region to know very much about this, and through education and communication, I think you will make a better case to improve the situation.
Thank you very much. Madam President, your take-home messages.
First, we were very pleased to be in Stockholm as a partner this year. And on wastewater, we consider that wastewater is really a big challenge, and it's a big challenge for people, but it's a challenge also for IWA, in the sense that we have inside our members people from research and people from utilities. So we have that chance of having innovators and people who are applying, and so wastewater is still a challenge. What I bring back from this week is some ideas on maybe how to be more efficient, or on which topic we should increase our reflection inside IWA. The first one, I don't know if it will be well understood in English, but we discuss about decentralization, and I vote myself against the idea that everything will be decentralized for many reasons. First, decentralization can be taken very differently where you are. A decentralized plant in China can be 200,000 people, when it is a big centralized plant in some other part of the world. So what is clear is that, yes, there are now some very strong and good reflection on other way and non-sewer pipes, which is something much more built. Should we speak about decentralization, or I would try to say maybe, but I'm not sure it understand that deconcentrating our means, because in fact it's maybe a good idea not to have all the plants at the same place, but start to have delocalization. Probably delocalization means. But I would try to make a difference between delocalization of the technologies and on the wastewater solution and decentralization, because in my opinion there is a difference between the technology and where you do and where you put the technology, and where does people will take care of it. And I think decentralization is more who is going to be doing the job, who is going to be responsible, who will do, and we will have to work on how do you do delocalization of your means, and how do you fit that with the people and the decentralization of the responsibility. And we need to work on both concepts, because you could and you will, by delocalization, have to have people physically on the site, probably more responsible on the site, so we need to work on that concept. But maybe sometime you would keep a centralized control for health aspect. So I think we need to do the difference between the technical means and the organization. And we know that governance and organization is a key parameter in doing things well. Of course, we can use what has been done, because IWA has been working on the water-wise city, who has to work, how do you put people in the technology and the control and the governance. So I think it could help us also to analyze all those change. We are convinced on the circular economy, but the circular economy is different on a small size and very big size. A big plant can help circular economy because you can produce some nutrients or new nutrients. So we need to work. On the reuse, we need to make a difference between water reuse and nutrient reuse. It's a different things, and I didn't hear fit for purpose. I think it is very important to know what For what purpose? That's why I'm a bit against sometimes saying that we are all going to drink our wastewater. I think, yes, we can use our wastewater. I'm not sure that I want to drink them. And I think we need to keep on that discussion. So the delocalization and the fact that it will help to be more local and for circular economy, it's something I bring home, and we will have to work at the level of IWA and to be on helping that. And of course, it means working on capacity training, capacity transfer, and things like that, because we will have to help the utilities and work with them on what does it mean, and work on that. So I think it's a strong message for me that yes, we are moving on that, and we need to structure the way we work and the way we deliver to utilities.
Thank you very much. And as you have noticed today, for you who perhaps haven't attended all week, I mean, there is, like Torkil also showed, and that was apparent in the descriptions from the rapporteurs as well, I mean, a huge amount of different kinds of messages. Perhaps on a little bit lighter note, as a researcher, Dr. Drexel, have you learned something during this week?
Oh, sure. No, we know everything already. We didn't learn anything. No, of course we learned. And that's why I love coming here. Yeah, there are some other conferences which are much bigger and where it's very difficult to meet people, and here's a lot of space for meeting people. But for me, this whole context, and I like to build on what Diane said, the whole context of resource recovery and reuse, or wastewater reuse, is fascinating from a research perspective because it cuts across the sectors. So I have to go out of the sector. It's sanitation and then agriculture, sanitation and energy, sanitation and health, sanitation and industry. As soon as we come to reuse, we enter another sector. And it's also then cutting across disciplines. And that's why we have here all these different reporting teams which bring from this perspective, from that perspective, the feedback. That's absolutely justified. But then we have to see that these research questions go today far beyond, is this the right technology? They go far beyond, should we go centralized or decentralized? Because the clock is ticking. Yeah, the SDGs are only 13 years away. And the questions today are implementation, going to scale, and having impact. So and that means also for the research sector that we have to switch. It brings us out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
And the research questions today are more, what kind of partnership is needed to be financially viable? What kind of mixed financing is the right one? What kind of business model is the one which is needed? And I think that's very, very challenging. And before I came here, I was more in a gloomy state because the challenge we see is that in the engineering schools, this kind of thinking on finance models, on business models is missing. And in the business schools, they have no idea about the waste sector or about the sanitation sector. Yeah, that is always subsidized as no business. So I was worried about the young generation, because if we want to go this way, we need this kind of knowledge across the sectors. We have to bridge. But while being here, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about new initiatives. We made a lot of partnerships, and that's where also we as IMI would like to contribute to fill these gaps together with the next users. So for me, it was very, very valuable.
Thank you very much. We're happy that we could cheer you up a bit. But I also learned that actually the Stockholm School of Economics has just this fall started a new program called Global Challenges that is part of their training for economists. It's four semesters. And I think it will have good impact for all of us and encourage additional collaborations with the young generation. President Carrera, so what do you feel that you have learned this week?
A lot of things, of course, and you benefit from talking to many people, many fields, and try to learn from other sectors as well. But anyways, I would like to share some of the conclusions that in my sector, that is financing, were very, very important, I think. One is that there's still the need for public financing. So we should not think that private financing will solve all of the problems in the future. Because in the case of the Latin American region, 100 million people do not have sanitation, 30 million people do not have adequate water supply, and these are the poorest of the poor. These are the most vulnerable, probably in the small cities, in the slums, in the big cities, and also in the rural areas. Therefore, the case for public intervention is strong and will be in the next couple of years. Secondly, there is room, and we have also seen some very interesting success stories of the involvement of the private sector in financing. And there are, of course, some companies, some utilities that are fit for a relationship with the private sector more intensively, such as Savesp. This is the utility in Sao Paulo in Brazil, which gets their financing through the New York Stock Exchange. So you can find that as well in the region. Thirdly, there is a lot of room for public-private partnership, one thing, but also for public-public partnership, because sometimes there is not a coherent policy approach and execution between the public sector themselves, both at the general level and also at the regional or local levels. But also from the public-private perspective, you have to understand, and that is why one of the things that we learned very much is we have a role in trying to bridge the gap between the needs of the demand for financing and the demands of products for the financiers, and also the supply. What are the projects that can be put into the table for these financiers to finance? And we have learned also that when trying to go this way, we have to find simple solutions and simple models so that the financial community try to understand better the water sector. And perhaps also learn from other sectors. We have seen that in the energy sector, there is a much more involvement of the private sector providing solutions than in the water sector. And we should learn from that sector what were the key elements that allowed the private sector to chip in. So that is another thing. And finally, two more things. One is we should try to convey these messages to the governors, to the presidents, the ministers. This is a very important work that we have done, and we think we will continue doing it in the future, and of course it's part of the responsibilities of our institutions as development banks. And finally, I think that all of us that are here are blessed to work in this sector that is marvelous. And it's beautiful to enjoy the laugh of a children that has water when he and his family hasn't had water in years. So I think this is one of the most rewarding issues for all of us that are here, that we share a commitment, share a passion for working in water, and that we will have work for many years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diane.
I've learned something which surprised me a lot, although I had listened it once before. In one of the workshops, it was explained that even if you increase the number of people who have access to wastewater treatment or toilets, you don't see automatically the impact on health effect. So it's very disappointing, because you could say that if there are 30% access, you have less problem than if it is 20 or 10. And of course it's very disappointing, because when you want to fight and to convince political responsible mayor that they have to do something, if the figures are demonstrating that it doesn't move a lot, it is complex. But what is very interesting, and probably we could use better, is that in fact probably until you reach the very high level of service, you don't get the results. Why? Because in fact, if you have your kids who are going to school and there is not so nice toilets, or if they are meeting people in the street and those people are infected because they don't have their toilets, you are living in a city where the global health is not good. And I found that very interesting, because we should go and see the political authority to say you have to go to the best thing, because otherwise you stop too early. And I will probably use it, because I have always been struck by, sometimes I have some difficulties to convince people that they have to go further in delivering water, because the main political people, they live not in the slums. The main people who are even at the head of the utilities, or they are not in those cases. They have the water, or they have truck of water coming. So we need to find a way to explain that it has, that global effect is really need to have global control. And if you don't control the risk, if you don't control the flows, then you have a partial. That's why you don't see the figures. Of course you have to do it, because you increase globally and slowly. But it means that you can't stop in between. You have to go at the high level. And that was really something very interesting, because I think we need to have that in mind, because we could be disappointed. We have done things and we don't see automatically the result. No, it has to be a global vision of health. It has to be globally looked at, and not just do that for one part of the city and let the other part alone. And I will use that next time I meet someone who is living in a nice part of a city, to remember that the kids are then walking in the shops, meeting other people. And why I do that? Because every year in France, when it is Christmas time, we have diarrhea increasing. It's not because we don't have toilets. We have exactly the same number of toilets from one day to another. It's just because you meet people, you meet your friends, you meet your family, you meet and you exchange your bacteria. So, if you want to have a good sanitary, you need to have the global sanitary at the global level of a city. And I think that it is important for me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that ties really nicely in. My colleagues that have helped me to summarize some of the key messages, one of from the plenaries has been that political leaders really do need to find a global, integrated approach to water challenges and solutions, and that's exactly what you're saying. And I like, because it said also that there's a need for a strong political push and support for water, because water is an orphan. It doesn't have a home in the global institutional framework, and that is needed in order for us to address these challenges systematically. Another key message has been during the week that we need to strengthen and build a strong, strong bridge between water, oceans, and the climate community, because these things are tightly interlinked. And instead of continuing working in silos, and also financing comes in silos, but there is a way of bringing that. It's important to bring these things together. Private sector involvement from users has been displayed and discussed in the sessions and through textile industry and other seminars. Valuing water, then of course the social, economic, environmental, but we have also in this year's program, just like last year, also addressed the spiritual dimension, and we think that work with faith, it was suggested that work with faith-based communities is a strong way of reaching out to many poor and those that are not engaged in this global water dialogue. Urban planning, urban cities issues, of course, have been something that has trickled throughout almost all conversations throughout the week. And then seeing wastewater not as pollution, but as an actual opportunity. Water is the underlying element for all Agenda 2030 challenges. And so SDG 6 is, of course, an excellent platform for the work that we need to do, but we also need to engage in all the relevant SDGs. And youth involvement, as they provoke us, as they are dynamic and visible, think differently than we do, it contributes to innovation and challenging the frameworks that we are used to. And I would like to conclude with what for Siwi is extraordinarily a strong and happy message, is that World Water Week plays and has a chance to play a more catalytic role on policy issues and bringing together the decision makers. And I've been to World Water Week for, well, virtually since the beginning, I think, off and on, depending on what areas of that I was working with. But I don't think I've ever seen so many people at a closing event. And that is something that shows the significance of this topic, that it is only increasing. And I don't take that lightly. I make that point very, very seriously. And we can do it, we can contribute to this, but we can't do it without our partners. So thank you again for your support and being our partners in this. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Mokonyane up on our stage.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Program Director, the Executive Director of Siwi, and the entire management of Siwi, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my singular honor on behalf of our country to have been part of this session, especially given what we have received starting early in the morning, including the work that was shared from the different rapporteurs of different sessions. Allow me also, on behalf of many other participants who are here and those that have left, to recognize the role of Siwi in organizing World Water Week 2017, that I'm sure that you will agree with me has been a rounding and a much more building and molding experience. We have moved beyond lamentations, beyond us being inward looking, but we have repositioned ourselves in the water sector as indeed those who have to interact and depend and also contribute to various other sectors, and reaffirming the fact that water is a catalyst that cuts across social, political, safety, and many other dimensions. And for that, I would really wish that we all also thank the organizing committee, as well as all other teams working behind the scenes that had made this a very memorable week, and a week that has also brought some of the finance ministers to have been directly participating and appreciating their strong responsibility in the water sector. Thank you very much to Siwi. A round of applause. Let's also acknowledge all the work and outcomes since the inception of the World Water Week in 1991, as well as the outcome of the 2017 event, the work of the 27 water laureates starting in 1991 with Professor David Schindler, dealing with the nutrification and acidification of freshwater lakes, and now in 2017, Professor Stephen McCaffrey on transboundary water law. We recognize that the annual Water Week has and remains the annual focal point for dealing with global water issues, but despite all of this, the good work that has been done since 1991, the world still faces the challenges of 2.1 billion people without access to safe water and 4.5 billion without sanitation. Furthermore, we continue to abuse our water resources with our waste streams. In my continent, in Africa, the demand for water for human consumption is growing, but also the demand for water to meet the growing demand for food and energy is also growing. Access to piped water increased in absolute number from 82 million urban dwellers with piped water in the year 2000 to 124 million in 2015. But the urban population served with piped water on the premises declined from 40 to 33% over the same period. In sanitation, the situation is worse, with only 30% of Africans having access to improved wastewater services, and more than 23% are practicing open defecation. In addition, a vast majority of the African utilities do not provide wastewater services, and some that did in 2000 up to 2006 dropped wastewater collection services due to high costs and technical difficulties. The social economic implications of zero access to water have serious consequences to food security, health, and it further exacerbates more issues that are related to poverty and economic development, as well as the emancipation of women in every community. Furthermore, we need to adapt to climate change, because when we talk about climate change, we also talk about water. We have to be ready to deal with the consequences of extreme weather events, both extreme drought and extreme flooding. Having said this, we must recognize the work of the men and women who have been dealing with extreme droughts in Somalia, in some parts of Kenya, South Sudan, and in my own country, South Africa. The devastating fires in Spain, California, and South Africa, and the extreme floods in Sierra Leone 2 weeks ago, and this week in Texas as a result of Hurricane Harvey. We need to acknowledge the memory of those families who have lost their loved ones as a result of these catastrophic events, particularly the people of Sierra Leone and Texas. It has been repeatedly stated that there is no shortage of money. We cannot only rely on public sector funds to close the gap in water and sanitation provision. We need to mobilize and get access to private sector funds as well as public funding. We need to accept that there might be some risks that we have to take as we navigate the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to ensure that the teams of experts who assess projects for financing are also not stuck in their own paradigm and continue to assess new technologies as bankable projects against the backdrop of conventional technology. We must be bold and fund these disruptive solutions and technologies, particularly with regard to sanitation. The fourth industrial revolution must be linked to a revolution in the way we fund new and appropriate breakout or disruptive technologies within the water and sanitation fields. We need to embrace new technologies that support our route towards the realization of the SDGs, and an appreciation must also be made to new world-class technologies that also emanate from developing countries, which could be implemented and rolled out in both developing and developed countries. We cannot afford to continue to do what we did yesterday and expect to see a different result tomorrow. We have to be bold, we have to act, we have to improve based on the mistakes we would have committed in action. It is significant that during this week, the Green Climate Fund, through Mr. Howard Bemsley, launched the manual on mainstreaming gender in Green Climate Fund projects. This manual is a key step to support country partners to enhance their capacity to address gender equality globally. The framework of our new water and sanitation paradigm must be, firstly, the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular SDG 6, as well as the other goals that are water and sanitation dependent, SDGs 9, 11, 13, and 14. And secondly, the call to action by the United Nations and World Bank High-Level Panel on Water, consisting of 11 serving heads of state. I believe that as we drive the African continent and other developing continents towards the realization of the African Union's Agenda 2063, as well as the other agendas in some continents, will continue to play a critical role in all matters pertaining to the delivery of water and sanitation, particularly to the African people, as well as targeting primarily the rural areas, women and young people in particular. Infrastructure development is a sure catalyst towards this realization. The realization of the SDG 6 is a must-do for all member states. The issue of wastewater, the untapped resource, as adopted by the UN, is a clarion call to say, let's not waste water. Wastewater can and must be used to augment water sources. From our South African point of view, our Vision 2030 through the National Development Plan is what drives our government, business, and civil society to the achievements of the goals of the SDGs. This call to action by the High-Level Panel on Water is mobilizing across the world to ensure the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. It assists in contributing to the achievement of the other SDGs that rely on the development and management of water resources. It contributes towards providing political leadership that draws attention to key issues, helping to mobilize the knowledge and finance required for implementation, stimulating innovative initiatives, and following up and mainstreaming of improved approaches. These actions will inter alia include the following: catalyzing changes, building partnerships and international cooperation, resilient economies and societies and disaster risk reduction, sustainable cities and human settlements, universal access to safe water and sanitation, water and the environment, infrastructure and investment, water governance, water data, valuing water. Finally, I am excited that the theme for the 2018 World Water Week is water and ecosystems. Ecosystems such as forests, wetlands, and grasslands are a critical part of the global water cycle. I further propose, on behalf of the African Ministers' Council on Water, that we should, coming from Africa, be afforded an opportunity to share with the world through Siwi what works originating from Africa, what policy paradigm shifts we are considering working through the AU, how best can we build capacity for South Africa, but also using South Africa as a launching pad with its institutional capacity, the Water Research Commission, the Energy and Water Skills and Training Agency of the Government of South Africa, and most importantly, using the AU's Infrastructure Commission chaired by the President of the Republic of South Africa, so that then the world can also begin to appreciate that in the quest to intervene in Africa, Africa has to have a single access route as well as a common platform, but most importantly, reaffirm the fact that water knows no boundary. And therefore, solutions for Africa require everybody to appreciate that we can be in a position to work together and ensure, therefore, that we share our skills, we share our resources, we create best practices, and most importantly, we create capacity for the future of Africa in a much more integrated and coordinated manner. And therefore, the support to AMCAO becomes quite important. The support to our institutions of higher learning also becomes important. And most importantly, the partnership between the private sector, government, and civil society is of paramount importance. We're looking forward to have a robust engagement on how to preserve and protect our own environmental conditions in Africa precisely because of the historical effects that have come to bear negatives against future developments in our continent. Once more, allow me to thank Siwi for having organized again an occasion that is going to be quite memorable. Congratulate the junior prize winners, congratulate the professor for the award that he received, but most importantly, commit ourselves to go back and serve those that we claim to represent. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Minister Mokonyane. As South Africa, you yourself and your president are part of the high-level panel on water, and I know we were told also that your country are now facing water shortages in the Western Cape. A few years ago, we recognized that the Queenie water handling Durban water in a very efficient way. My question, follow-up question, what would you like to bring to the high-level panel to us, the experience of South Africa in handling scarce water resources? Maybe it's a long question, but a short answer.
Yes, just two things that we would like to bring. Firstly, it's around issues of water security for the future. You can't put infrastructure that would not guarantee that there will be water in the foreseeable future, and that requires adaptation, embracing innovation, and appreciating that is said to be conventional is no longer conventional. And therefore, we need to adapt to the material conditions. We need to work in a different manner. And most importantly, we need to bring those who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow to be in the center of finding the solutions. And that then means investing in education, in research, bringing young people to provide what can actually help us to move forward. And hence, our partnership with institutions of higher learning. Secondly, the shift towards putting more resources on science and technology. And thirdly, broadening our water mix, using desalination, promotion of recycling of water, and lastly, investing on less energy-dependent water security and infrastructure programs.
Thanks a lot for that program. Thank you a lot, Mr. Mokonyane. Thank you. Now, I believe that the theme of World Water Week 2017, reduce and reuse, has brought us on a long journey. Actually, we started off by being launched to the International Space Station Monday morning with astronaut Christer Fuglesang sharing with us some, not this image, but fantastic images from Mother Earth, from the outer orbit of space. And when we started to plan this World Water Week, as I mentioned Monday morning, where can we be more, where do we have the knowledge in saving water and reusing water? Of course, it's in outer space. From that outer space, International Space Station, Peter Thomson brought us back to Mother Earth to discuss and share with us the oceans, what came out of the Oceans Conference in New York earlier this year, but also oceans and also the linkages between fresh water and oceans. During all this, I think our rapporteurs mentioned they've been attending 75 sessions, all of them. I think we have more than 240 sessions going on this week with some 400 co-conveners or conveners, which is a record number. We have 3,300 participants. We have discussed from a country perspective, regional, municipalities, this morning cities, actors. I think it's a very broad range of both the actors and organizations, but also challenges that we have discussed. So from outer space down to groundwater level, this has been the journey that we have taken on this week. Now, let me thank all panelists and speakers this morning, Minister Mokonyane, South Africa, Mark Watts from C40, and we had also on screen DSG, or Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed from United Nations. The rapporteur teams, terrific job. Have you had any sleep this week? I wonder, because this is 75 session, then draw conclusions. Torkel, for your eminent, also getting back to us what came out of all these seminars that have been providing this week. And also Katarina for moderating this session this morning. Our key collaborating partner, Diane, Jose, and Pai, thanks a lot also for being with us for a year, planning and also implementing and running this World Water Week. Now, that brings us to an end, actually, of this World Water Week. And apart from being here, and I agree, it's a full hall, it's fantastic. Concluding days often be quite empty, but this is not the case. A World Water Week, full hall. But we also have colleagues around the world that follow us. So I think apart from us, roughly 3,000 people here, some 41,000 are following the week online. So it's really a world conference. So we are really making sure that the messages coming out of this week is also reaching well beyond Stockholm. Now, the clock is ticking. We are soon ending this conference. There will be a new one next year, on a happy note. We will meet 26th of August or 31st of August. Actually the same week as now, so just book it into your calendar. Final week of August 2018. We will get back here to Stockholm. And the theme for that week is water, ecosystems, and human development. And our scientific program committee will meet immediately after this to start planning that week. So you are all welcome back. We have some key collaborating partner for next year. It's Africa Development Bank, the Nature Conservancy, and it's also UNESCO World Water Assessment Program. So with that, safe travel back home. See you again next year. And join me also viewing some images and pictures of the week that just have expired. Thanks a lot.